Nathan and Emily Barrett looked like the perfect couple, until Emily vanished one October morning, and Nathan's flawless mask began to crack under the weight of a single, silent mistake. Nathan and Emily Barrett lived the kind of life that made people believe in fairy tales. To the outside world, they were the definition of a perfect couple. Their two-story brick house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in Cedar Falls, Iowa, surrounded by trimmed hedges and blooming flowers. They waved to neighbors, hosted holiday dinners, and smiled in every photo they posted. Nathan worked as a financial advisor, trusted by many in the community for his calm demeanor and polished appearance. Emily, a soft, spoken art teacher, spent her time painting, teaching, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. They had been married for 8 years, with no children, no visible fights, and no dramatic past. To everyone watching, theirs was a love story with no cracks. But love is rarely what it seems behind closed doors. In truth, the cracks had been forming quietly, invisible to anyone but Nathan. He had grown tired of Emily's routines, her optimism, her quiet passion for things that no longer interested him. While she painted flowers, he dreamed of freedom. While she planned their future, he plotted a way out. And yet, he never showed it. He kept wearing the mask of the perfect husband. He still brought her coffee in the mornings. Still kissed her goodbye before work. Still remembered their anniversary, even if he no longer cared. Nathan's real thoughts were dark, cold, and calculated. Divorce wasn't an option he was willing to entertain. It was messy, public, and it would cost him financially. Emily came from a wealthy family. Their assets were intertwined. A separation would leave him exposed, vulnerable, possibly ruined. He didn't want the embarrassment. He didn't want questions. He wanted control. And in his mind, the only way to regain that control was to remove Emily from the equation entirely. It began slowly. He started studying cases, real-life disappearances, cold murders, unsolved crimes. He watched documentaries, read court transcripts, took notes. He began testing things around the house, like how long bleach took to remove bloodstains from different surfaces. He bought gloves, plastic sheeting, cleaning agents, all hidden in the garage under the guise of a home improvement project. Every move was calculated, every detail carefully considered. The scary part was how normal everything looked on the outside. Emily had no idea. She still shared photos of their date nights, still talked about buying a cabin someday, still believed she was safe. Friends noticed nothing. If anything, Nathan seemed more attentive than usual. He brought her flowers more often, joined her for walks, asked about her art. To Emily, it felt like their relationship was turning a new corner. To Nathan, it was the final act of a play he had written entirely on his own. Their last vacation together had been to Colorado. The pictures showed a smiling couple in the mountains, arms wrapped around each other, eyes squinting in the sun. Emily posted the photos with captions full of love and laughter. Nathan smiled too, but only because he knew something she didn't. He had already chosen the month. He had already chosen the day. He had even planned what he would say to the police. Everything about his life had become a performance, one he rehearsed over and over in his mind. He believed he could carry it out flawlessly. He believed no one would ever know. And he believed Emily, the woman who trusted him most, would be the easiest one to fool. It was a chilly Saturday morning in early October when everything changed. The leaves had begun to turn, blanketing the sidewalks in gold and red. Emily was supposed to teach her usual weekend art class at the local community center, something she never missed. She loved those mornings, meeting her students, sipping coffee, sharing her passion. When she didn't show up and didn't call, her friend and fellow teacher, Marcy, grew worried. Emily was always reliable, always early, always texting if she ran late. But this time there was silence. Marcy drove to Emily's house, expecting to find her car gone or perhaps see a note explaining an emergency. Instead, the car sat untouched in the driveway, and the house looked still, too still. She knocked several times, no answer. After trying to call again, she finally called the police to report her friend missing. Within the hour, 2 patrol officers arrived, followed by Nathan, who showed up looking confused and concerned. He told them that Emily had gone for a run earlier that morning and hadn't come back. He acted surprised when told she never made it to class. His voice was steady, but his eyes stayed dry. Officers entered the house with his permission. Nothing appeared out of place. No signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle. The kitchen was clean. The bed was made. Emily's running shoes were missing, just as Nathan had described. Her phone and purse were still inside, but her fitness tracker was gone. To some, it seemed plausible. Maybe she had gone running and gotten lost or injured. Maybe she was still out there, needing help. But to the detectives on scene, something about Nathan's story felt too prepared. By that afternoon, the missing person report went public. Friends, neighbors, and volunteers began helping with the search. Police organized a grid sweep of nearby parks and trails. Drones flew overhead, scanning the dense woods behind their neighborhood. Search dogs were brought in to follow any trace of her scent. But as hours turned into a full day, no evidence of Emily appeared. No dropped water bottle. No footprints. No clothing, nothing. Nathan kept himself visible. He gave interviews to local news stations, pleading for his wife's safe return. He stood beside posters and lit candles at vigils, always speaking calmly, always composed. He repeated the same details to every reporter. That she left at dawn for a run and never came home. That he had searched for her himself. That he just wanted her back. People praised his strength. They said he was handling the unimaginable with grace. But behind closed doors, detectives were beginning to take a closer look. They noticed the lack of emotion, the rehearsed tone, the absence of panic. People grieve in different ways, but something didn't sit right. Nathan had an answer for everything, but none of his answers led anywhere useful. His alibi was tight, maybe too tight. He said he slept until 7:30 that morning, woke up to find Emily gone, and assumed she had stuck to her normal running route. But there were no witnesses who saw her leave. No surveillance footage showed her jogging that morning. Not even the early risers walking their dogs remembered spotting her. It was as if she vanished into thin air. Police began quietly examining his background. They found no history of abuse, no previous calls to the home, but what they did notice was a sudden change in his financial behavior. 3 months prior, Nathan had increased Emily's life insurance policy to a substantial amount, over $1 million. When questioned, he claimed it was routine, part of long-term planning. But it planted a seed of doubt. Why plan for death in a marriage that appeared so alive? The perfect couple image was beginning to blur. The longer Emily remained missing, the clearer it became. Something terrible had happened. And the only person who might know the truth was the man who claimed to love her most. Investigators began pulling at every thread in Nathan's story, and slowly, small inconsistencies started to unravel the image he had so carefully built. One of the first clues came from reviewing nearby surveillance cameras. While their house sat on a quiet suburban street with no cameras directly facing it, a gas station 2 miles away had a camera angled just enough to capture passing cars on a side road. At exactly 5:17 a.m. on the morning Emily disappeared, a car matching Nathan's make and model passed by. It was subtle, blurry, and not enough to confirm anything, but it contradicted his claim that he hadn't left the house until 7:30 a.m. When detectives brought this up, Nathan calmly stated that he had gone for a drive before sunrise because he couldn't sleep. He described the route, claimed he had been overwhelmed with work stress, and said he often took short drives to clear his head. It wasn't illegal, and it wasn't suspicious on its own, but it was the first small crack. A man who seemed so precise, so composed, had made a mistake. His story, which had remained unshaken for days, had now shifted. Curious about his movements that morning, detectives pulled more camera footage from other streets and parking lots along the route Nathan described. Most of them showed nothing, but one backyard security camera from a neighbor, partially obscured by trees, offered a haunting clue. Around 40:50 am. It caught a faint silhouette moving across the Barrett's driveway. The video, grainy and dark, showed what appeared to be Nathan lifting something large into the trunk of his car. It was wrapped in what looked like a dark tarp. The image wasn't clear enough to confirm the contents, but it didn't resemble gym equipment or anything typically found in a suburban garage. Still, circumstantial evidence wasn't enough. There was no blood, no body, and no concrete proof of a crime. The house had been spotless. Investigators brought in forensics teams, but their first sweep turned up nothing significant. No fingerprints out of place, no broken objects, no visible signs of a struggle. Nathan had cleaned thoroughly, and for a moment it seemed his plan might hold. But detectives weren't ready to give up. They kept pushing, digging deeper, and examining everything they could get their hands on. One officer decided to review all of Nathan's recent purchases. Over the past 3 months, He had bought large quantities of cleaning products, plastic tarps, industrial gloves, and duct tape from several hardware stores around town. The purchases had been spread out and made at different locations, as if to avoid suspicion. None of the clerks remembered him. The receipts didn't scream guilt, but the combination painted a troubling picture when viewed together. Even more curious was Nathan's behavior in the days after Emily's disappearance. While he appeared helpful in public, behind the scenes he had begun contacting lawyers. Not to find his wife, but to inquire about accessing joint assets and insurance paperwork. He asked about property rights. He reviewed bank accounts. All subtle signs that he wasn't expecting Emily to come home. The case was still missing its center. Everyone suspected foul play, but without a body, it remained just a theory. Nathan's calm demeanor, so polished and precise, had become unsettling. He smiled when people offered comfort. He nodded with sympathy. But behind his eyes was something distant, something cold. Despite all the efforts to maintain control, Nathan had underestimated one thing. Every plan, no matter how meticulous, has a weak point. And his was getting closer to being discovered. He had covered his tracks well, but not perfectly. Something small, something easily overlooked, was waiting to betray him. The breakthrough came not from fingerprints or witnesses, but from something Nathan hadn't even considered. A fitness tracker. Emily wore hers religiously, a slim, black band on her wrist that tracked her heart rate, sleep cycles, and step count. It had been collected early in the investigation, along with some of her personal items, but had sat in an evidence locker until a digital analyst began reviewing it in detail. What seemed at first like a routine check turned into the clue that cracked everything open. The data revealed that Emily had gone to bed at 10:42 p.m., the night before she vanished, consistent with Nathan's version of events. But things took a strange turn in the early morning hours. At 4:52 a.m., her heart rate suddenly spiked, sharp and rapid. The kind of spike that usually followed intense physical exertion or fear. For the next 7 minutes, it remained erratic before going flat at exactly 4:59 a.m. After that, there was no further activity, no steps recorded, no change in heart rate, nothing. According to the data, Emily had never left the house. Her heart had stopped before sunrise, hours before Nathan claimed she went for a jog. The device also logged her location during that time, inside the home. This digital trail told a very different story, and it was one Nathan couldn't manipulate or explain away. The technology, unnoticed and silent, had captured the moment everything went wrong. Armed with this new information, investigators obtained a second warrant to perform a more detailed forensic search of the house. This time, they weren't just looking for signs of forced entry or visible bloodstains. They were looking for microscopic clues, things hidden from the naked eye. In the upstairs bathroom, under the sink and along the edges of the floor, luminol revealed faint traces of blood that had been scrubbed away. It was nearly invisible, but it was there. Small droplets had settled into the grout lines. DNA confirmed it belonged to Emily. The picture was finally becoming clear. Emily had been killed inside her own home. Likely in the early hours before dawn, the stage story about her morning run had been just that, a story. Nathan had gone to great lengths to clean the scene and control the narrative. But he had overlooked the power of digital evidence. In trying to erase all traces of her death, he missed the one detail that couldn't be wiped away, her own heartbeat, recorded in real time by a device she wore every day. Investigators began to map out the timeline. Nathan had likely killed Emily sometime between 4:45 and 5:00 a.m., cleaned the bathroom quickly, and wrapped her body in a tarp. The grainy security footage from the neighbor's backyard, previously dismissed as inconclusive, now matched perfectly with the fitness tracker's data. The object loaded into his trunk shortly after 5:00 a.m. wasn't just suspicious anymore, it was confirmation. They also learned that Nathan had disabled the home's smart doorbell system days before Emily's disappearance, claiming it was malfunctioning. But tech experts discovered that it had been manually disconnected just hours before the murder, preventing it from recording any footage that night. Another calculated move. But again, not flawless. The neighbor's security system had still picked up fragments, and the fitness tracker had still been running. Nathan was brought in for another round of questioning, but this time the tone had shifted. Investigators laid out the inconsistencies, the digital evidence, and the blood findings. His calm demeanor began to erode. His responses grew shorter, his gaze more distant. The man who had once been so composed now looked cornered. He still denied everything. But the story was unraveling fast. For the first time, police had proof that Emily hadn't simply gone missing. She had been murdered. And they were closing in on where Nathan had taken her next. With the timeline now clear, and the evidence pointing firmly toward Nathan, the final missing piece was Emily's body. Investigators believed he had transported her in the trunk of his car, but where he had taken her remained a mystery. It was the last part of his plan that had held firm. He had picked a location that was private, remote, and unknown to anyone else. But Nathan had made one final, crucial misstep, one that would undo everything. The tires on Nathan's car had been caked with dried mud on the morning Emily vanished. At first, it was dismissed as normal, given the time of year and the weather. But a forensic soil expert was brought in to examine the particles, hoping for even the smallest clue. Samples were analyzed in a lab, comparing their composition to known locations around Cedar Falls. After several days, they had a match, a stretch of abandoned farmland nearly 40 miles away, once owned by Nathan's deceased uncle. The land had been untouched for years, now overgrown with weeds and forgotten by most of the family. It was the perfect hiding spot, quiet, isolated, and legally inaccessible to the public without suspicion. Armed with this lead, investigators secured a warrant and made their way to the site. It was sprawling, covered in tall grass and surrounded by rusting fences. Near the edge of the property, beside an old barn that had partially collapsed, the ground looked recently disturbed. It wasn't obvious at first glance, but trained eyes noticed subtle differences in soil color and compaction. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed a rectangular anomaly beneath the surface. They dug carefully, silently, and with growing certainty. 2 feet down, wrapped in the same dark tarp seen on the neighbor's camera, they found Emily's body. She had been placed there with deliberate care. No clothes, no identification, no jewelry. Just silence and earth. The autopsy confirmed strangulation as the cause of death. There were bruises around her neck and signs of a struggle, but no defensive wounds. She had likely been caught off guard, attacked suddenly and overpowered. The time of death aligned exactly with the fitness tracker's final heartbeat. The search was over. What had once been a missing person case was now a confirmed homicide. The investigators had the digital timeline, the blood evidence, the tarp, the surveillance footage, and now, the body. It was a complete picture, and it led directly to one man, Nathan Barrett. He was arrested at his office without incident, sitting behind his desk as if nothing had happened. Colleagues looked on in shock as he was handcuffed and led out by officers. For weeks, he had continued to work, maintain his routine, and pretend that his life hadn't fallen apart. But now there were no more lies to tell, no more masks to wear. In court, prosecutors laid out everything in meticulous detail. They described the motive: financial gain, the life insurance policy, the desire to escape the marriage without consequences. They showed the jury the fitness tracker data, the blood traces, the footage, and the evidence from the burial site. Nathan's defense tried to create doubt, suggesting the evidence was circumstantial. But the jury didn't buy it. The picture was too complete, the sequence too precise. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty of first-degree murder. Nathan Barrett was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The man who once seemed so in control, so calm and deliberate, was undone not by a major flaw in his plan, but by a single detail he never saw coming. He had cleaned the house, staged the story, and picked the perfect place to hide the body. But he had forgotten about a device no bigger than a bracelet, a tracker that silently recorded the truth in the last moments of Emily's life. In the end, it wasn't a detective or a witness that exposed his plan. It was a heartbeat,